The marble floors of Hartwell Corporate Tower gleamed under the harsh fluorescent lights at 2:47 a.m., reflecting the chaos that had erupted on the 42nd floor. Security guards barked orders into their radios while paramedics rushed through the glass doors of the executive suite, their heavy equipment clanging against the polished surfaces. "Move! Clear the hallway!" shouted Detective Reynolds, his voice echoing off the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the sleeping city of Chicago. But amid the frantic energy and blinking emergency lights, one figure moved differently, quietly, purposefully, almost invisibly. Marcus Williams pushed his cleaning cart to the side and watched the commotion with careful eyes. The 60-year-old janitor had been working these floors for 8 years, long enough to know that when ambulances arrived at Hartwell Industries at this hour, it usually meant someone had pushed themselves too hard. The corporate world didn't sleep, and neither did its casualties. Through the crowd of suits and badges, Marcus caught a glimpse of the victim, a woman in an expensive navy blazer, her silver hair spread across the Italian leather of the conference room floor. Victoria Hartwell, the CEO herself, the woman who had built this empire from a small family business into a Fortune 500 corporation. The woman whose portrait hung in the lobby downstairs, whose signature appeared on every company memo, whose decisions affected thousands of lives. Now she lay motionless, her face pale as porcelain, while chaos swirled around her. "Sir, you need to step back," a young security guard commanded, approaching Marcus with the kind of authority that came from a uniform and a badge. "This floor is restricted." Marcus nodded silently, gripping the handle of his cart. He had learned long ago that in spaces like this, men who looked like him, black, working class, invisible, were always the first to be moved along. But something about the scene made him hesitate. Something was wrong beyond what the others could see. The paramedics were struggling. He could hear it in their clipped conversations, see it in their hurried movements. "We're losing her," one muttered to his partner. "Blood pressure's dropping fast." Victoria Hartwell's assistant, a sharp-dressed woman in her 30s, paced frantically near the windows, her cell phone pressed to her ear. "Yes, I understand the board needs to be notified. But right now we need to focus on—" She paused, her face crumbling. "I don't know if she's going to make it." The words hit the room like a physical blow. Board members who had arrived in the night whispered among themselves, their faces masks of concern that barely concealed the calculation beneath. Marcus had seen this before, in different settings, the moment when people stopped seeing a person and started seeing an opportunity. But as he watched the scene unfold, Marcus noticed something the others had missed. Victoria's breathing pattern, the slight tremor in her left hand, the way her eyes moved beneath her closed lids. He had seen these signs before, in a place far from corporate boardrooms and marble hallways. In a small apartment in Englewood, where his late wife Sarah had fought her final battle against diabetes. Where he had learned to read the silent language of a body in crisis. The paramedic was reaching for the wrong medication. Marcus took a step forward, then stopped. Who was he to interfere? A janitor challenging trained medical professionals in front of corporate executives and police officers? The smart thing would be to stay quiet, to remain invisible as he always had. But sometimes staying quiet meant watching someone die. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as Marcus Williams faced a choice that would change everything. Marcus Williams had calloused hands and kind eyes, the kind that came from 20 years of raising his daughter Emma alone after Sarah's death. At 60, he moved through the corporate world like a ghost, arriving before dawn to empty trash cans and mop floors while the city's powerful slept. His Navy work uniform bore the faded Hartwell Industries logo, a reminder that he was part of the machine, but never truly welcome in it. He thought about Emma every night during his shift. 26 years old now, working 2 jobs to pay for nursing school, dreaming of a life beyond their small apartment in Bronzeville. She was his pride, his purpose, his proof that good could grow from struggle. But the student loans kept piling up, and Marcus's paycheck barely covered rent, let alone Emma's tuition. Dr. Victoria Hartwell had built her empire on precision and control. At 55, she commanded boardrooms with the same intensity that had earned her a medical degree from Harvard 30 years ago. Before inheriting her father's small medical supply company, she had been an emergency room doctor, a detail lost to most people who only saw the corporate titan she had become. Her silver hair was always perfect, her suits always pressed, her decisions always final. But tonight, lying unconscious on the conference room floor, all that power meant nothing. Standing over Victoria was her nephew, Richard Hartwell, 38 years old and hungry for control. As vice president of operations, he had spent years waiting for his moment. His expensive watch caught the light as he gestured dramatically to the gathered board members, his voice carrying the authority of someone born into privilege. "We need to think about succession planning," he whispered to the company's chief financial officer. "The board has a responsibility to protect shareholder interests." The paramedic, Jake Morrison, was 29 and fresh out of training. His hands shook slightly as he prepared the injection, not from inexperience, but from the pressure of performing in front of so many important people. He had followed protocol to the letter, but something felt off about the patient's symptoms. Security Chief Tom Bradley, a former Chicago police officer, watched everything with suspicious eyes. To him, Marcus was just another potential problem, someone who didn't belong in this world of power and money. Bradley had made a career of knowing who belonged where, and janitors definitely didn't belong near medical emergencies involving billionaires. In the corner, Victoria's personal assistant, Michelle Chen, clutched her phone with trembling fingers. She had worked for Victoria for 7 years, knew her schedule better than her own, and had never seen her boss show weakness. Michelle understood the corporate hierarchy better than anyone. She lived in the space between the executives and the workers, belonging to neither world completely. The tension in the room crackled like electricity. Power, money, and prejudice swirled together while a woman's life hung in the balance. And Marcus Williams, invisible to most, stood at the center of it all, carrying knowledge that could save or damn them all. "Sir, I told you to step back." Security Chief Bradley's voice cut through the medical chaos like a blade. He moved toward Marcus with the swagger of a man who had spent years moving people around like chess pieces. "This is a restricted area. You need to leave now." Marcus raised his hands peacefully, but his eyes stayed fixed on the paramedic preparing the injection. The medication vial gleamed under the harsh lights. Insulin. Wrong choice. Dead wrong. He had watched Sarah's blood sugar crash too many times not to recognize the signs. Victoria wasn't diabetic having a sugar spike. She was having a reaction that would make insulin deadly. "I understand, sir, but—" Marcus began quietly. "But nothing," Bradley snapped, his hand moving instinctively toward his radio. "You're a janitor. Clean the bathrooms and stay out of the way." Richard Hartwell looked up from his whispered conversation with the CFO, his face twisting with irritation. Here was his moment to show leadership, to prove he belonged in the corner office, and some maintenance worker was causing a distraction. "What's the problem, Bradley?" "Just removing unnecessary personnel, Mr. Hartwell. Nothing to worry about." "Good. We can't have—" Richard's eyes swept over Marcus dismissively, taking in the work uniform, the calloused hands, the quiet dignity that he mistook for simple-mindedness. "We can't have interruptions during a medical emergency." The paramedic, Jake Morrison, hesitated for just a moment. Something about the older black man's expression made him pause. There was knowledge there, concern that seemed professional somehow. But the pressure was enormous. Board members watching, police officers taking notes, the weight of treating Chicago's most powerful CEO crushing down on him. "Excuse me," Marcus said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I think there might be—" "That's enough," Richard exploded, his composure cracking. The stress of the night, the opportunity slipping through his fingers, the presence of someone who clearly didn't belong, it all boiled over. "Security, remove this man immediately. How did he even get up here?" Bradley grabbed Marcus by the arm, not gently. "Come on, old man. Time to go." But Marcus planted his feet. In his mind, he saw Sarah's face during those terrifying nights when her body betrayed her. He remembered holding Emma as a baby, knowing that sometimes speaking up meant everything, even when the world tried to silence you. "That medication will kill her," he said, louder this time. The room went dead silent. Jake's hand froze over the injection site. Richard's face flushed red with rage. Even the detectives stopped their note-taking to stare at the janitor who dared challenge medical professionals. "Did this man just—" Richard sputtered, his voice dripping with disbelief and disgust. Did a maintenance worker just try to give medical advice? Bradley, get him out of here before I call the police myself. Sir, I was Marcus started. You were nothing, Richard roared, his mask of corporate politeness completely shattered. You push a mop. You empty trash cans. You don't speak unless spoken to, and you certainly don't pretend to know medicine. Michelle Chen watched from the corner, her heart racing. She had seen Marcus work for years, always polite, always professional, always moving through their world like he understood something the rest of them missed. There was something in his eyes now, not fear, but a deep sadness, like he was used to not being heard. The paramedic looked between the syringe in his hand and Marcus's face. Protocol said, listen to the executives, follow the medical assessment, trust the system. But 30 years of emergency medicine had taught Marcus Williams to read the signs that textbooks couldn't teach. If you give her that insulin, Marcus said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of experience and loss, she will die in 3 minutes. The words hung in the air like a challenge to everything they believed about power, authority, and who gets to speak when lives are on the line. Marcus's mind drifted for just a moment, back 35 years to a different emergency room, where he wore green scrubs instead of a janitor's uniform. Dr. Marcus Williams, and that's what they had called him then, at Cook County Hospital. Fresh out of medical school at Northwestern, idealistic and determined to save everyone who came through those doors, he remembered the weight of a stethoscope around his neck, the way his hands had never shaken during the most critical moments. He had been good at it, reading symptoms that others missed, seeing patterns in chaos, staying calm when everyone else panicked. The other residents had called him the Whisperer because he could diagnose conditions that stumped more experienced doctors. But that was before the malpractice lawsuit, before the insurance costs became impossible, before the medical board hearings and the lawyer fees that ate through his savings like cancer, before one mistake, a tired resident's error during a 36-hour shift, had cost him everything he had worked for. The flashback lasted only seconds, but Michelle Chen caught something in Marcus's posture that made her pause. The way he stood, the clinical way he observed Victoria's symptoms, the precise language he had used. That medication will kill her. Not I think, or maybe. A statement of medical fact. Jake Morrison felt it too. Something about the janitor's certainty cut through the noise of authority and hierarchy. In his brief career, he had worked with enough doctors to recognize the voice of someone who knew what they were talking about. But the pressure from Richard Hartwell was overwhelming. Marcus looked down at his calloused hands that had once sutured wounds and started IVs, now reduced to gripping mop handles and emptying trash cans. He thought about Emma, studying for her nursing boards, dreaming of helping people the way her father once had. She knew his story, knew why he cleaned office buildings instead of saving lives. She had begged him never to give up completely. Dad, she had said just last week, you still have all that knowledge in your head. All those years of medical training don't just disappear because of some paperwork. But paperwork mattered in the real world. Licenses mattered. Status mattered. And right now, Marcus Williams was just a 60-year-old black janitor in a room full of powerful white people who had already decided he didn't belong. He watched Victoria's breathing become more shallow, saw the slight blue tinge beginning around her lips. The signs were clear as daylight to him. Hypoglycemic reaction, probably from skipping meals during a stressful day, made worse by whatever medications she was taking. Insulin would send her blood sugar crashing into a coma. In his mind, he could see the correct treatment protocol as clearly as if it were written on the wall. Glucose, not insulin. Check her blood sugar first. Simple, basic emergency medicine. But who would listen to a janitor? Who would believe that the man they paid to clean their toilets had once walked these same halls as a doctor? The sirens outside grew louder as more emergency vehicles arrived. Time was running out, and Marcus Williams faced the same impossible choice he had wrestled with for 20 years. Stay silent and safe, or risk everything to do what he knew was right. Stop! The word came out of Marcus with such authority that everyone in the room froze. Even Richard Hartwell's mouth snapped shut mid-sentence. Marcus stepped forward, gently but firmly pushing past Security Chief Bradley's outstretched arm. His calloused hands, steady as a surgeon's, reached toward the paramedic. Jake, give me that glucometer from your bag. What did you just call me? Jake's eyes widened. His name tag read, J. Morrison. Marcus shouldn't have known his first name. Your name is Jake Morrison. You graduated from Chicago EMS Academy 18 months ago. Your instructor was Captain Rodriguez, and you're doubting yourself right now because this patient's symptoms don't match what you learned in the textbook. Marcus's voice was calm, clinical, completely different from the quiet janitor they thought they knew. The room went dead silent. Richard Hartwell sputtered, How could you possibly? Because I taught the emergency medicine rotation at Northwestern for 12 years, Marcus said, never taking his eyes off Victoria's pale face. He knelt beside her, his movements precise and practiced. Jake, check her blood sugar, now. Jake's hands moved automatically, muscle memory responding to the unmistakable voice of authority he'd been trained to obey. The glucometer beeped. 42, he whispered, his face going white. Oh my God, she's hypoglycemic. Severely hypoglycemic, Marcus confirmed, his fingers finding Victoria's pulse. If you had given her that insulin, her blood sugar would have dropped to 0. She would have gone into a coma and died within minutes. The paramedic's hands shook as he set down the insulin vial. I almost... You followed protocol based on incomplete information, Marcus said gently. It happens. Now give me 50 milliliters of D50. Fast. Detective Reynolds stepped forward, his notebook forgotten. Wait a minute. You're a doctor? Was a doctor, Marcus said, accepting the glucose solution from Jake's trembling hands. Dr. Marcus Williams. Northwestern Medical School, class of 1989. Practiced emergency medicine for 15 years before he paused, inserting the IV with the fluid grace of someone who had done it thousands of times. Before circumstances changed. Richard Hartwell's face had gone from red to pale. That's impossible. You're a janitor. You've worked here for 8 years cleaning floors. Because sometimes life forces you to start over, Marcus said, administering the glucose. But knowledge doesn't disappear just because you lose your license. Experience doesn't vanish because you wear a different uniform. Victoria's color began to improve almost immediately. Her breathing deepened, her eyelids fluttered. The room watched in stunned silence as she slowly opened her eyes. What happened? Victoria whispered, trying to sit up. You had a hypoglycemic episode, Marcus explained, supporting her carefully. Probably from skipping meals during a stressful day. Your blood sugar crashed. Victoria looked up at him, recognition dawning slowly. You're the janitor from the 42nd floor. Marcus, right? Yes, ma'am. You saved my life. It wasn't a question. Michelle Chen stepped forward, her voice shaking with emotion. Dr. Williams, we had no idea. All these years you've been working here, and we never knew. Richard Hartwell backed toward the window, his earlier arrogance crumbling like a house of cards. This is insane. How was I supposed to know he was a doctor? He never said anything. Because men like you never asked, Marcus said quietly, helping Victoria sit up fully. You saw a black man in a janitor's uniform and decided that was all I could ever be. Jake Morrison looked like he was seeing a ghost. Dr. Williams. I remember now. My instructor used to talk about you. You were legendary at Cook County. They called you the Whisperer because you could diagnose anything. That was a long time ago, Marcus said softly. Victoria's eyes were sharp now, fully alert. She looked around the room at the faces staring back at her. Some shocked, some ashamed, some amazed. Her gaze settled on Richard, whose earlier talk of succession planning suddenly seemed grotesque and premature. Richard, she said, her voice gaining strength, I think you and I need to have a very long conversation about leadership and character. The power in the room had shifted completely. The invisible man had become the most important person there, and nothing would ever be the same again. 3 weeks later, Marcus Williams walked through the lobby of Hartwell Corporate Tower, wearing a navy suit instead of a janitor's uniform. The marble floors still gleamed under the lights, but everything else had changed. Dr. Williams, Michelle Chen called out, rushing to catch up with him near the elevators. The board meeting went well? Marcus smiled, still adjusting to hearing his title again after 20 years. Very well. The medical advisory position is officially approved. I start Monday. Victoria Hartwell had moved quickly after that night. Within days of her, she had established a new position, Chief Medical Advisor for Employee Health and Safety. The salary was more than Marcus had made in his entire 8 years as a janitor. More importantly, it came with something he thought he'd lost forever: respect. The elevator doors opened to reveal several employees who nodded respectfully. Word had spread through the building like wildfire. The janitor who saved the CEO's life wasn't just a janitor. He was a doctor who had been overlooked, undervalued, and ignored for years while walking among them. On the 42nd floor, Marcus passed the conference room where it had all happened. Through the glass, he could see the empty chair where Richard Hartwell used to sit. Victoria had acted swiftly there too. Richard's termination had been quiet but absolute, effective immediately, with no severance package, and a very clear message sent to the rest of the leadership team about character and integrity. Richard's final words to the board had been telling. How was I supposed to know? He never acted like a doctor. Even in disgrace, he couldn't understand that respect shouldn't be earned by credentials alone, but by how you treat every human being you encounter. Marcus knocked on Victoria's office door and entered to find her reviewing employee files. Marcus, she said, looking up with genuine warmth, I've been thinking about our conversation regarding Emma. His daughter's name still made his heart race with pride. The scholarship program? Approved. The Victoria Hartwell Medical Education Fund will cover full tuition for 10 students each year, starting with Emma's final semester. Victoria stood and walked to the window overlooking the city. But that's not all. I've been reviewing our hiring practices, our promotion policies, our entire corporate culture. She turned back to him, her expression serious. How many other Marcus Williamses are working in this building? How many brilliant people are we overlooking because we can't see past uniforms and assumptions? Marcus thought about the night security guard who spoke 3 languages, the cleaning lady who had been an engineer in her home country, the maintenance man who solved complex problems with the building systems better than the expensive consultants. Probably more than you'd imagine, he said. Victoria nodded. Starting next month, we're implementing new policies, skills assessments for all employees, regardless of position, educational support programs, and mandatory bias training for all management. She paused. It should have happened years ago. The intercom buzzed with Michelle's voice. Ms. Hartwell, the Chicago Tribune is here for the interview about the medical emergency and new company initiatives. Victoria looked at Marcus. Ready to tell your story to the city? As they walked toward the conference room together, Marcus thought about the phone call he'd had with Emma the night before. She had cried when he told her about the scholarship, about his new position, about how everything had changed in one impossible night. Dad, she had said through her tears, you never stopped being a doctor. You just stopped getting credit for it. The reporter was setting up her camera when they entered. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, Chicago stretched out below them, a city full of Marcus Williamses, people with hidden talents and forgotten dreams, waiting for someone to see them clearly. Victoria began the interview with words that would make headlines. Sometimes the person who can save your life is the same person you've been overlooking every single day. Marcus Williams smiled, finally visible after 20 years of being invisible. 1 year later, Dr. Marcus Williams stood in the bright atrium of the newly opened Hartwell Community Health Center on Chicago's South Side. The walls were lined with photos of the center's staff, doctors, nurses, and medical students who looked like the neighborhood they served. Emma Williams-Chen adjusted her new nursing badge and grinned at her father. Ready for the ribbon cutting, Dr. Dad? Marcus laughed, still getting used to the sound of his daughter using both their names. She had graduated at the top of her nursing class, debt-free, and chosen to work at the community center instead of the high-paying hospital jobs that had been offered to her. Just like her father, Victoria had said with pride, choosing purpose over profit. Through the crowd of community members and local politicians, Marcus spotted a familiar face trying to blend into the background. Richard Hartwell looked older, humbled, working now as a mid-level administrator at a small nonprofit after months of unemployment. No major corporation would touch him after word spread about his behavior that night. He caught Marcus's eye and nodded, not quite an apology, but an acknowledgement of a lesson learned too late. Victoria stepped up to the microphone, her voice carrying across the packed room. This health center exists because one man reminded us that wisdom doesn't come with a title, and heroism doesn't require recognition. Dr. Marcus Williams taught us that every person we meet might be the one who saves our life, if we're humble enough to listen. The center was already treating 200 patients a week. The Hartwell Medical Education Fund had grown to support 50 students annually. Most importantly, Hartwell Industries had become a model for other corporations, proving that recognizing hidden talent wasn't just morally right, it was good business. Marcus thought about all the people who had walked through his life invisible, just as he had been. The janitor at Northwestern, who had actually been a chemistry professor in his home country. The security guard at his old apartment building, who was studying to become a paralegal. The grocery store clerk who painted beautiful murals in her spare time. How many dreams were being overlooked right now? How many solutions to the world's problems were hiding in plain sight, waiting for someone to ask the right questions? As the crowd applauded and cameras flashed, Marcus Williams realized that his story wasn't really about him. It was about everyone who had ever been underestimated, overlooked, or written off because of how they looked or where they worked. The most important person in your life might be someone you see every day, but have never really noticed. The person who could change everything might be the one you walk past without a second thought. Sometimes the hero isn't wearing a cape. They're wearing a uniform you don't respect. Sometimes the person who saves your life is the same person you never bothered to see. If this story inspired you to look closer at the people around you, to question your assumptions about others, or to treat everyone with the respect they deserve, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe for more stories that remind us of our shared humanity. Because in a world that often divides us, we need more reminders of what connects us. The most powerful change starts with how we see each other.